What's up, folks? How's it going? This is Watch. Hope you guys are all doing well. And today we're going to be taking a look at the 3 Nintendo Switch options that are available to you right now. We're going to be taking a look at the new OLED model, the base model Switch, as well as the Switch Lite. We're going to talk about things like key advantages and disadvantages that each console presents, the differences between all three, and determine which one is ultimately the best Switch for you. Now, before we get into all that goodness, let's talk about our sponsor, Skillshare, that made this content possible. Now, if you don't know already, Skillshare is one of the biggest online learning communities out there, designed for anybody that wants to broaden their horizons or knowledge on a given topic, whether that's involving more creative endeavors such as in physical fine art or digital content creation. Perhaps you want to master or learn for the first time on how to use things like Premiere Pro, Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator, etc., or you want to increase your productivity and marketing skills. Chances are there's probably a class on Skillshare.com that's suited perfectly for your knowledge base and your skill level. Now, me being a tech YouTuber myself, I definitely have to recommend that you guys check out the brand new class that Skillshare just launched with Marques Brownlee of MKBHD, where he talks about the secret to his success and how he creates his awesome YouTube content, from initial conception to research, scripting, shooting, editing, and then finally posting the content on the YouTube platform. So if you're interested in maybe creating your own tech channel or just interested in his process, definitely check out that class. Now, if you're interested in Skillshare Premium, where you get access to all these awesome classes, definitely click on the description down below. The first 1,000 subscribers to use that link and to sign up get a free 1-month trial of the premium service. We want to thank Skillshare so much for the continuing support of our channel. Now, just a brief history on the Switch. It first came out back in 2017, and since that time, Nintendo has sold over 89 million units. And while its competitors on Sony and Microsoft side have been really pushing the hardware to its limits to bring Ultra HD gaming to your living room, Nintendo has really been dialing things back to focus more on flexibility and a more mobile-friendly gaming experience. What always made the Switch really unique was the fact that it's a hybrid gaming console with effectively 3 modes: a living room mode with a TV dock, a full handheld console, as well as a mobile multiplaying platform in tablet mode where you share the single screen and multiple Joy-Con controllers. Now, currently what you're looking at are the 3 available options for the Switch, including the new OLED model, the standard base model Switch, as well as the Switch Lite. In terms of price difference, you're looking at $350 for the OLED, $300 for the Switch, and about $200 for the Switch Lite. Now, the OLED and the base model of the Switch are effectively the full hybrid versions of the console, where you can use them in the 3 modes that we talked about earlier, since they come with a TV dock and detachable Joy-Con controllers. The Switch Lite is still an exclusive handheld gaming experience, since you cannot output the display to an external monitor or TV source, since you can't use the dock or any third-party attachments. Trust me, there's been a lot of hacking attempts to do so, but literally on the SoC chip, Nintendo has taken out the TV output portion of the chip. Now, physically speaking, the design of the OLED is certainly the most modern and has the thinnest bezels. It virtually takes up the same footprint as the base Switch, but the tablet is 2mm wider and 20 grams heavier than the base model. But in the hand, you're never going to really tell the difference between the two. The Switch Lite is still the most compact version of the console, weighing just around 276 grams and being a lot more pocket-friendly from a dimensional standpoint. Furthermore, in terms of ports, connectivity options, all 3 consoles have a 3.5mm headphone jack, a USB-C charging port, a top-mounted game cartridge slot for physical games for the Switch, as well as a SD card expansion slot going up to 2 terabytes. Internally, you still have 32 gigabytes available on the Switch Lite and the base model, versus the new OLED model upset to 64 gigabytes of internal storage. Now, obviously, the biggest difference between all 3 devices is going to be the display configuration. On the OLED model, we have the largest display of 7 inches, 6.2 inches on the base model Switch, and 5.5 inches on the Switch Lite. Now, the advantages on the organic LED display on the OLED model is going to be greater dynamic range, black levels, whites, as well as be brighter in outdoor lit conditions. The color rendition is going to be slightly more accurate and certainly a lot more vibrant than the LCD-based displays on the other models. Not to mention, in tablet mode, the viewing angles are going to be better, which is going to be important in the scenario where you're going to have multiple users looking at the screen off axis. Now, interestingly, all 3 models actually have the same exact resolution and refresh rate, 1280 by 720 and 60 hertz. And interestingly, the Switch Lite, since it actually has the smallest display, has the highest pixel density or PPI count of 267 versus 237 on the base model Switch and 209 PPI on the OLED. Now, even though the OLED has the slightly lower pixel density count, it actually still is the best viewing experience based on the advantages that we just listed earlier. And frankly, it's really hard to tell the difference between all three in terms of clarity and sharpness. And really what stands out most is the overall color rendition, brightness, and black levels of the OLED, which definitely outshines any kind of pixel density gains you're going to get from the other models. Now, from the launch version of the Switch to these current generations, all of them are still powered by the NVIDIA Tegra X1 SoC, which consists of two quad-core processors, an ARM Cortex-A53 and A57, clocked in at 1 gigahertz. You also have an NVIDIA Maxwell-based GPU that offers about 256 stream processors. Now, in terms of floating point operations per second, which is a way to measure computing power, the Switch in handheld mode rates about 397 gigaflops, and in TV dock mode, which allows for more power to be drawn in from the SoC, you get around 500 gigaflops. Comparatively, the Series S and PS5 are significantly higher rating, 10, 12 teraflops of computing power. Now, granted, the X1 processor was designed several years ago, and obviously the modern tech is going to be faster, but Nintendo and NVIDIA did improve the X1 by introducing the X1 Plus chip, a 16nm architecture versus 20nm architecture in 2019. So the 2019 version of the Switch, Switch Lite, and OLED are powered by this processor, which does greatly improve power efficiency and battery life. The original 2017-2018 version of the Switch got around 2.5 to 6 hours of battery life, versus you're looking at 4.5 to 9 hours on the OLED and base model Switch, as well as 3 and 7 hours of battery life on the Switch Lite. Furthermore, in terms of actual battery capacity itself, on the OLED and base model Switch, they're using the exact same capacity of 4,310 milliamp hours. On the Switch Lite, we have a 3,570 milliamp hour battery. Now, interestingly, even though we have a larger, more brighter display on the OLED model, Nintendo claims that you're going to get similar performance because the display is actually a little bit more power efficient than the LCD panel on the base model Switch. So both should get around 4.5 to 9 hours of usage. Based on our experience thus far, we found that to be mostly true, where you're getting anywhere between 4 to 5 hours of gameplay. Now, based on my experience over the years with the Switch Lite, the battery performance is not as good as the more modern Switch base models, and indeed the OLED. You typically get anywhere between 3 to 4 hours of gameplay. So if battery life is important to you, it's certainly something to factor in on these mobile platforms. Lastly, since all three of these devices are utilizing the same SoC, they have the exact same 802.11 ABG and AC Wi-Fi antenna, as well as Bluetooth 4.1 connectivity for wireless headsets, as well as headphones, and NFC compatibility as well. Lastly, as we mentioned before, in our full comparison of the OLED versus the base model Switch, there is no advantage when it comes to outputting it to your TV. They're both 1080p consoles, exact same docks, besides the fact that you do have a LAN connection on the OLED dock versus the standard base model Switch does not have that connectivity. But other than that, they're both 1080p, exact same gaming performance all the way. And that brings us to the question is, where is the Switch Pro? And most likely the Switch Pro is probably going to come out sooner rather than later. Perhaps Nintendo was originally planning a launch around this time, but due to supply shortage issues, that didn't happen. And the upgraded on the internal specifications is definitely needed on the Switch. As I mentioned before, it's completely outgunned by the newer generation consoles, and most likely even when the Switch Pro comes out, it's probably going to be not as powerful as the Xbox Series S and PS5, because Nintendo is in a different gaming market and segment. They don't really need to compete with those consoles, but what is needed is a 4K output and definitely a faster generation console that's more relevant to today's gamers. But in terms of the available lineup right now with the OLED, base, and Lite version of the Switch, I definitely think that these are still some of the best handheld gaming systems on the planet. And with the Switch library growing to almost 4,000 games, the content is excellent, time-tested, and there's a big thriving community online of Switch gamers that are devout followers. Now, in summary, if I didn't have a Switch already, I was coming in fresh and wanted to get the most for my money, I still think that the Switch Lite probably offers the best value since it is the same exact internal specifications as the other Switch. Certainly it doesn't have the flexibility of being played on an external display, but in terms of the majority of the content that you're going to experience on the Switch can be experienced through the Switch Lite at a much lower entry price. And if you're deciding between the base model Switch and the Switch OLED, I definitely think $50 is worth getting that better screen. It completely changes the experience, modernizes the console quite an extent, not to mention that the fact that the build quality, the kickstand, and slight changes in terms of the design definitely enhance the experience as well. But really, other than that, guys, that's really it. Check out the description down below for more details about everything we've talked about. Check out our Skillshare link if you want to try it out for free. Big thanks to them for sponsoring this content, and an even bigger thanks to you guys for watching, supporting the channel. Make sure you have post notifications turned on and subscribed if you haven't already. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you real soon in the next one. Take care.